Is Daf Yomi is Zevachim Daf Memches. This is the Daf Yomi for Shabbos Kodesh, recording it on Friday or Shabbos Parashas Lech Lecha. We're going to start on top of 48a. The Mishnah said that the power and the sai, or the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur, are slaughtered in the northern part. So Gemara wants to know why we're just beginning our discussion of the sacrifices that are being slaughtered in the north with the sin offerings. Why not start with the Ola? Milchti Tzafon Ba'ola, since the fact that there should be a sacrifice in the north is written explicitly about the Ola offering. Nisni Ola Beresha. The Ola should have been discussed first in the Mishnah, not the Chatas. Mara says the answer is Chatas Aidi de Asi Midrasha Chavivalite. Since the Chatas is learned out from a drasha, from an exposition, therefore it's more beloved to the author of the Mishnah. Therefore, that's written first. Mara says, but still, then we start with the power and the Sarah Yom Kippur, which are inner offerings, offerings brought inside the sanctuary. Less common. Nisni chatos achitzonos. Why not start with the offerings of the sin offerings that are in the courtyard, the more common ones, and then go to the offerings that are inside the sanctuary? Gemara says, no. I did the nichnas tamam of since the blood of the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur, the blood goes inside. Therefore, we start with that. I did the nichnas tamam of chaviv away. The Gemara says, "V'tzafona ba'ola hechaksiba." Where is it written that the Ola offering is done in the north? Where is that written? Because it says v'shachato so al yeracham mizbeach tzafona. It says you shall slaughter the Ola next to the altar in the north. Gemara says, well, Ashkachan ben son, but that verse only refers to a sheep. Ben bakar mino. And how do we know also a cattle is slaughtered in the north? Gemara says, Amakra, it says v'im minatson. There's a vav before the sheep. And the vav mosif on alinya rishon. So the vav is coming to add on to the sheep. V'yomad el yom mitachtan. And we learn about from the verse before, and what's discussed before, the cattle. Gemara says, Hani chomandam or melamdin. That only goes according to the one who says we learn out from that. But from the extra vav in that manner. El amandam or emalam. And according to the ones who say we can't, Michael and Mamer. How would we know that the Ola is in the north? The Tanya, because we weren't in the Brisa, it says about the carbon asham taloi, ve'im nefesh. And asham taloi is a carbon you bring if you're not sure if you sinned. And so therefore it says ve'im nefesh. So it says l'chayev al safek milos. The previous asham taloi, the previous passage discusses before an asham taloi discusses a me'ilah. And so it's telling us by saying ve'im nefesh to tell us, the Rabbi Akiva, that you're liable, according to Rabbi Akiva, to bring an asham taloi, even if you're not sure if you did a me'ilah. The Chachamim, however, say potrin. Chachamim say if you're not sure if you did a me'ilah, you're exempt. Okay, isn't the argument Mar Savar Lameidin? Rabbi Akiva says we do learn it. Mar Savar Ein Lameidin. And the Chachamim say we don't learn it. So according to Chachamim, how do we know whether or not the olas are done in the north by a bakar? So the Gemara says, Amar Papa the Koyamo Maiden. Everybody says, even the Chachamim would say you learn. Time of the Rabbanan. And what's the reason why the Rabbanan say you don't bring an asham taloi for a meal? Because Nemar Kam mitzvos, it says by a person who does asham taloi, it says the word mitzvos for Nemar b'chatas chelav, and also says by the sin offering, achatas, which is the general sin offering, is called achatas chelav. It says mitzvos. Just like by the regular sin offering, it's only if you do it intentionally, you get kares, and accidentally chatas. Afkan, also the asham taloi is something shechayav and alzdon kares v'shilo chatas. Something if you did it accidentally, you bring a chatas. But the me'ilah, if you did it accidentally, you bring an asham. So therefore, we know that according to Chachamim, you don't bring an asham taloi. But generally, they would say learn out the vav. Whereas Rabbi Akiva, why? So the Rabbi Akiva, what does he do with this? Gzeir shava of mitzvos. He's to tell us ma'alan bekavua. He learns out this gzeir shava to teach us, just like the chatas is a fixed korban for poor, for rich. Also asham taloi is only going to come for something which is for a fixed sin offering. So just like a sin offering is fixed, kavua. It's also a fixed offering. To exclude a sin offering, the tumas mikdash v'kadashav, that if you're not sure, tuma of entering into the temple while you're tamei, the olav yoridu, which is variable, and there you wouldn't bring an asham taloi. And the Rabbanan say, Ein gzera shava mechsa. No, the Rabbanan say once you make the gzera shava, you apply it across the board. And just like we learn about it if we're going to learn about it for one aspect of the offering, we'll learn it for the whole thing. We're not going to do it partly. Rabbi Kiva nami ein gzera shava mechsa. Rabbi Kiva should also say that. So therefore, so what's the nature of the dispute? Rabbi Kiva Savar, the im nefesh ksiv. Rabbi Kiva says, it says in the pasuk, the im nefesh. And that teaches us, vav mosif al inyan rishon. And so that's to tell us, Rabbi Kiva says, that since it says, the im nefesh, that's to teach us, the vav is adding on to the first. Meaning to say, Asham Toa is adding on to the Milas Asham, going back to the previous answer. So, Rabbanan Nami Oksiv Im Nefesh. Rabbanan also have the Im Nefesh. So, so maybe this is their argument. Tomorrow, Sever Hekesh Adif. Rabbi Kiva holds that the Hekesh, that when there's a Gzera Shav and Hekesh, the Hekesh is more important. Umar Sever Gzera Shava Adif. Whereas the Rabbanan say we follow the Gzera Shava, whereas Rabbi Kiva says follow the Hekesh, and that's why they compare it to the previous passage. Umar says no. Kuli Alma the Hekesh Adif. Even the rabbis would say a Hekesh is more important. V'amil Rabbanan Tachtun Hu Degamer Me'elyon La'asham Beketev Shkam. The rabbis will say, in our case, don't say that the upper passage of the Me'ilah teaches us about the lower passage, but rather the lower passage of the Asham Toa makes a law from the upper passage to teach us Asham B'Kesef Shkalim, that just like that, to teach us that an Asham you have to pay a minimum of 2 shekel, the minimum value. So don't say, don't say the Asham Toa should be more strict than the for sure sin. Just like if you for sure sinned, you bring a chatas worth any amount. So just say also by a doubtful sin, it's worth a danka, which is any amount. Don't say that. Meaning say an Asham Toa has to be worth 2 shekel, because the Hekesh doesn't contradict the Gzera Shava. So Rabbi Akiva, high Svarminole, how do they know an Asham Toa has to be worth at least 2 shekel? Nafkoim mivizos Torah Asham. Torah Tachas l'chol Hashamos. There's one law for all the Hashamos. So Teinach man the Itzlei Torahs, that works according to the one who says we derive from the Torahs. But man the Itzlei Torahs, but the ones who don't derive that from Torahs, how do they know that? They were that from Gomer be'erkecha, from that Gzera Shava. Gemara says Teinach hecha dachsev be'erkecha, but where it says be'erkecha, but Asham Shivcha Charufa, the low Ksiv be'erkecha, by an Asham Shivcha Charufa, where it's not written be'erkecha, Michael and Meimer. How do we know this idea? Gomer be'el. We learned it out from be'el. So they were not from there. So the Gemara says, okay, so we now know how the tzafon is required for the olah. Chatas mino and the bayit tzafon. How do we know that a chatas requires tzafon? A sin offering. They'll say v'shachatas a chatas b'mkom olah. Slaughter the sin offering in the place of the olah. Askan shlita. Okay, we know that the shlita, the slaughtering of the chatas, is in the north. Kabal mino. And how do we know that the receiving of the blood? D'chsev l'kacha koim midama. So it says he takes from its blood. So It teaches us it also in the place of the slaughtering. Mikabo atzum we know. And how do we know that the person who receives the blood also has to be in the north? Amarkra v'lakach, which means lo yikach. He should himself stand there. Askal a mitzvah la'akim. We know it's a mitzvah. I don't know it's essential. Krach v'neksiv. There's a different pasuk which states v'shachato so b'mkom asher yishchatas oah. You should slaughter it in the place where he slaughters the oah. V'tanya hechan oah nishchata. And where is the oah slaughtered? B'tzafon. Av zeh b'tzafon. So also this is in the tzafon. So the Gemara says, is this the source? Well, look for a number. In the place where the oah is slaughtered, there you should slaughter the chatas. So why was the Nazis chatas singled out? It's to tell us that if it wasn't slaughtered in the north, it's disqualified. The Gemara says, is that the reason? Maybe just tell us that the Nazis offering requires stuff, but the others don't. Slaughter sin offering in the place of the oah. All the chataos require north. Gemara says, Ashkan Tzayer Nasi. We found the north requirement for a Nasi's chatas, bein la mitzvah, bein la akev, whether it's for a mitzvah or it's essential. Shar chatos nami Ashkan mitzvah akev. And how do we know if you didn't do any of the other chatos in the north, it's disqualified? Because the north requirement is written specifically for a sheep offering and also for a goat offering. So that's how you know it's required, that it's essential. Ella oso amoy. So why does it say the shachat oso? Which one does not require the north? Mibalag d'tanya oso b'tzafon. It's in the north. Vein seir nachshon b'tzafon. But the goat that Nachshon brought during the dedication miluim offering, that was not in the north. V'tayim samach yado al rosh ha'sa'ir. Rabbi Sar Nachshon was smicha, that the goat of Nachshon requires the leaning over on it. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon Amar Rabbi Sir Rabbi Zevachim was smicha. The goats for idolatry require smicha. Sokatai techamina hovis Rabbi smicha is Rabbi namilatzach. But since it's required for smicha, it's also maybe requires the north. Kamashwan, it's not. So maskefo Rabbana and hanicho Rabbi Yehuda makes sense only according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that it requires smicha. So you might think it requires the north as well. But Rabbi Shimon, according to Rabbi Shimon, who says it's coming to include idolatrous animal for smicha, Michael, and Maimer. Why would you need to tell us and it's not required for the north? Amar Marzucha Breda. Amar Marzucha Breda Rav Tavil Ravina or Rabbi Yehuda Minicha. Is this good according to Rabbi Yehuda? Am I this Rabbi? Is Rabbi? Am I the lowest Rabbi? Lowest Rabbi? Is it even good according to Rabbi Yehuda? That which is included is included. You can't add on other things. You don't know anything about the north. It's talking about smicha. If there was no pasuk limiting it, I would have said it that it's supposed to be in the north from a comparison. And smicha itself, you could have learned that from a comparison. Ella midoros lo gamrinon. From one time laws of sacrifice, we can't learn out for all generations. We can't learn out the law of this from the special Nachshon Chatos for future generations. So Ella, so what does it mean? Oso b'tzafon, vein shochet b'tzafon. It's teaching us the Chatos in the north, but the shochet himself does not need to be in the north. Shochet mid Rabbi Achya nafan. The Gemara says no, we reject that. The shochet is learned out from Rabbi Achya. Rabbi Achya, whenever shachan was so al yeracham is beyach. Tzafona matam omer. Why does it say on the side of the altar to the north? Because you can't stand in the outside of the north and receive the blood, so you thought you can't stand out of the north and do the slaughtering. So we say no, that's not the case. Also b'safon, ve'im ben open safon. But saying that, maybe it means that offering is in the north, but the malika, the slaughtering of a bird, doesn't have to be in the in the north. Tanya Yochel ben Ov Ton Tzafon. I might think a bird requires the north. V'dinu ma ben son shel kavol kohen kavol tzafon. Just like a sheep, which doesn't have to be a kohen, it has to be in the north. Ben ov shekavol kohen eno din shekavol tzafon. A bird which requires a kohen for sure to require the north. Tamomer oso. Mala ben son shekin kavol klei. The Gemara says, yeah, but a bird, you wouldn't make such a comparison because the bird requires a utensil. Meaning to say, a sheep requires a utensil, but a bird doesn't. So how would you think that a sheep, you wouldn't be able to make such a kal chomer? Also, b'safon vein pesach b'safon. So the chat is in the north, but not the pesach. Then your wasn't ben Yaakov or Yochel ye pesach tom b'safon. I might think the pesach requires the north. The dinu ma'ol shekein lo kavol is ma'ol shlitaso. Kavol tzafon and ola, which is no time, has to be in the north. Pesach kavol is ma'ol shlitaso. And eno din she kavol tzafon. For sure, a pesach should be in the north. But the Gemara says, what kind of kal chomer is that? Ma'ol ola shekein kalil. The ola is totally consumed. And we're not from the chatas because chatas is not entirely burned. Mal chatas came a kaperet the creases, but a chatas shaves a torment. So me'asham, mal asham came kochi kochim. Don't worry, not from asham to pesach. Asham is kochi kochim. Kum namish came kochi kochim. And in fact, all of these offerings are kochi kochim, and a pesach is not. The Gemara says, "Om kedam rina maker." Uso b'tofim vein shachar b'tofim. Go back to the opinion. It's in the north, but not to slaughter. The Kachalach mid the Rabbi Achinach. Didn't we learn that out from Rabbi Achia, who said, "Oh, so b'tzafon shachar b'tzafon." Rabbi Mute shachar b'tzafon. That was not to exclude him from the north. That ain't shachar b'tzafon of a makabel b'tzafon. It's to tell us he doesn't have to stand in the north. But the Mekabel B'tzafon has to stand in the north. Mekabel L'Lakal Kachach? Nafka. Didn't Mekabel learn that from L'Lakal Kachach? Gemara says, no, that we reject. L'Lakal Kachach, oh, Masway. That we don't derive. The Gemara says, Ashkachan Shlita Ba'ola L'Mitzvah Kabbalah Nami L'Mitzvah Ashkachan Shlita V'Kabbalah Akam Minaman. So we find that Shlita by an Ola ideally should be done in the north and receiving in the blood, but how do we know it's a requirement? We're not from Kabbalah. It's just like the chatas, which comes only to the north, only because of the ola, it requires the north. And if you don't do it, it's disqualified. Ola sheba chatas mikocha eno din shemakev. It's for sure by the ola it should be required. It says, but mal chatas shekema chaperes l'chayve crucis. You can't learn from that. The chatas requires is atonement. We ever find that a secondary thing is more stringent than the primary? We never find that. Mara says, yes, we do. What about Meiser? That's redeemed. You will because of Meiser. Ain't no nifta. But if you buy food with the Meiser Shani, it's not redeemed. It's not because of Meiser. Shenitma Yipada, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Yikaver. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, it can't be redeemed. It's not that the tafel is stronger, it's just that it's not strong enough to allow to take redemption. Meaning to say it's the opposite. That shows it's weaker from the fact that it can't be redeemed. Okay, we'll stop here, Baruch Hashem. We'll review this obviously and do it in much more depth on Shabbos Kodesh. Shkoyah.